Welcome back. Today we shall take up, in continuation to what we have studied in staffing, we have completed the chapter relating to the portion relating to recruitment. Now what follows recruitment is this topic, that is selection. Selection follows recruitment. What I mean by that is that after the process of inducing the employment and initiating it, inducing the employee to apply for the prospective job, the next step is to go through the various process of finalizing the candidate who would be finally inducted into the organization. If we are to define selection, then out of the candidate who have applied for the job, from among them or from the application of those candidate, we choose the most suitable candidate to fill up the vacancies at different job position in an organization. So we can define selection as a process of discovering the most suitable and promising candidate. It is a process which consists of number of steps before we finalize the candidate to be selected as an employee of an organization. On the basis of the applications of various candidates, we try to find out who is the most promising, that is the candidate who holds a spark that yes, such candidate would be beneficial to the organization, they can be suitable for the work of the organization. So selection is merely a process of selecting the most promising and suitable candidate to fill up the vacancies or the job position, vacant job position that exists in an organization. It must be noted over here that there are various tested why this selection is aimed at. The selection is aimed at for three basic purposes. First, we want to know to what extent the employee or the prospective employee has the ability to justify the job and he would be successful in the job to which he is to be selected. So that is the performance potential. To what extent he can perform in the job, whether he would be successful in the job for which he is going to be appointed or not. Then secondly, we have to satisfy the ability and qualification as claimed by him, on the basis of which his selection is to be confirmed. So whether he possesses those ability and qualifications, that has to be assessed. And finally, beside this information that contains in an application, there are various information which has not been provided by the applicants. So we also aim at going through or obtaining, eliciting those information which will help us to predict that what would be the level of success of such employee in the particular job position. So with these three basic aim, an organization carry out the process of selection. The process of selection starts with scrutiny of the application form or screening of the application form. Once we induce the employee, the information is communicated about a job position being vacant in an organization, to a particular source, and the employees, the prospective employees, on knowing it, they just apply for the job in an organization. So the first step is to find out from among the number of candidates, from among the number of applicants rather we should say, only those applicants whose qualification matches to the job qualification that we require in the organization. The qualification that is needed for a particular job and the qualification and capabilities that is being narrated by the candidate in their applications matches. It is to be mentioned here that the number of candidates rejected at this stage outnumbers the candidate whose applications are finalized for further processing. So this is merely a preliminary screening of the candidate's applications form. Then the second step is preliminary interview. Now this preliminary interview is conducted by one of the manager of a personnel department. His purpose is not to elicit information about the qualifications, about his achievement, because these are the information which is already contained in the application form. But beyond that, there are various informations that has to be obtained, and these interview are connected with posing most definitive questions about the jobs and the job conditions. So in a preliminary interview, we find the readiness of a candidate for a job for which the vacancies are to be filled. And here some information like the residence of the candidate, then apart from educational qualification or the age, experiences, marital status, then some family background, or if the candidate has some references that are elicited by the personnel manager. So it is a first interaction which is aimed at testing that the candidate is true and genuine as per the information that is provided, and the capability that is claimed in their application matches the need of the organizational job. So that is a preliminary interview. The next comes after preliminary interview, the candidate who are thought to be given a chance or to take up the selection test. They are sometimes given an application forms, specialized forms to fill up the various details, and that depends upon the nature of the work and the organizations. So there is specialized application that is provided by the company itself, and they provide which elicit various information relating to the same thing that the application contains to confirm that they are the true candidate and genuine candidate. Once this process is completed, then next comes the selection test. Now this is the final test. There is a number of tests to assess the worth of a candidate, but the major test to be taken is performance test, or what we call endurance test, and the performance level test. The first test is performance test. What is the success? What is the chances of an employee being success in performing the job for which he is to be hired, he is to be selected? that has to be tested. Then he has to undergo various psychological tests like his intelligence test, personality test, aptitude test, and interest test. These are the psychological tests, which test whether the work has an interest towards the work or not, whether he is apt to learn the methods of doing a work or not, or he possesses a tact to handle the work or not. So all these are tested in the psycho test, which is known as psychological test. And the third test is trade test. Now this is the most important test, because trade test the ability of the person in real situations, not in an identical situation, but in a real situation, whether the person who is to be appointed, such person are capable of handling the responsibility of the job or not. That is the meaning of trade test. So after this selection test is taken up, and if there is a selection committee, so if the selection committee finds some of the candidate to go ahead for further approvals, then they may be recommended for selection interview. So these are a part of the entire selection process, selection interview as well as selection test. So selection interview follows the selection test. After the selection committee recommend, then a panel of expert test the various candidate on various aspects, on his learning, on his knowledge about the job, about handling a job situation, about handling a job responsibility, about his tact. Then after this selection interview, they checks the references, that if the candidate has certain references. Now references are checked because they provide an opinion about the characters of an employee who is to be selected. Now generally references only mentions about the positive aspect. They hardly mentions about the negative aspects of an employee. So here references are merely to assess that this person or these employee who are to be inducted, they possess a good behavior, they possess a good character, and they are worth to be appointed in the organization. They are suitable for this job. So well-known person who recommend them, based on them, we take a decision that if this candidate has qualified the test, and if he is being recommended by some great person or by some known person, and which may be an advantage to the organization, so we go for further step, and that is physical examinations. So a candidate has to go through physical examination to assess the physical fitness, to assess his endurance level in a job, whether he is having sound physique to handle the work or not. And finally, when he passes the physical test, then there is selection decision, which is being recommended by the selection committee, and finally they are approved by the appropriate authority. And once they are approved, the next step follows, that is, there is an employment contract, which sets out in details that what are the terms and conditions of employment, what is the nature of employment, what are the perquisite, what are the remunerations, what are the job prospects of this employment. So these are the process of selection. Once we induce the candidate, once we find a number of applications, and then we start with scrutiny of the application, and finally once we find the candidate suitable, we enter into an agreement contract, and then we finally induct or appoint the candidate to the job position. So this is all for today. Hope to meet in the next lecture.